Good day everybody, and welcome to one of my favorite activities in RuneScape, as well as many players' most hated activity, player-owned ports. The player port and activities and rewards therein are indeed one of the more in-depth and complicated parts of RuneScape to understand and make good use of, and I've thought for a long time about making a guide for this to make it easier for players to understand and to be able to get into. Because the rewards from ports are pretty amazing. It used to be better money a year or two ago, but it's still half decent money for almost zero effort once your port is built up. And for iron accounts like mine, it's an absolute must to have any high level gear that's easily obtainable. But one of the things that players hate most about this is that you won't actually see any usable rewards from ports until a month or maybe two, or realistically more than that after you started building it up. Furthermore, gaining months worth of progress in ports is required for trimmed completionist capes, and many players I've talked to are really stuck and behind on that because ports is just hard to get into. All that makes this activity something you'll want to start ASAP, as soon as you possibly can. This video is timestamped, and I will try to cover a ton of content and break it down as easily as I can, but if you're only interested in certain parts, you can definitely hop around. I have actually been putting off and dreading putting this video together for a long time because there is just so much to go over, and I knew it would take a lot to get all this information together in a way that is actually helpful for anybody. Anyway, this is it. Here goes. So for starters, let's talk about what the player port actually is. Have you ever played one of those city builder mobile games or older games, even like The Sims or Roller Coaster Tycoon, where you start with a little something and a little bit of money, do activities, or send your little people out to acquire money and resources and build stuff, and go get more money and build better and better stuff? Well, it's basically just that. Player ports is a step up from AFK activities, or a step down depending on how you see it, in that there isn't really any active grinding you can do to make your port building go any faster. When you start, you get one boat and some crew members and a captain. You send them out on a voyage, and then you have to wait for them to come back. This is much like archaeology research or farming, where you can be offline and just have to wait for things to finish doing their thing. The idea is that you send out these voyages, get some resources or currency from them, buy more crew members or upgrades for your ship or port, eventually buying more ships, and repeat as your port grows and grows. That's the very high level idea of what ports actually is and how it works. Really quickly, let me mention the rewards, because I'm sure the second most pressing question most players have is, why do I need to do this anyways besides for the dumb achievements? Actually, personally, the achievements are the last reason I do ports, but anyways, the rewards are many. The thing about ports though is that, as I mentioned, you won't actually be able to get any usable rewards until at least a month or two after you've started developing your port. For the most part, your rewards are resources that you can only use within ports. More on all that later, but the rewards that you can actually get from ports can really be split up into three categories. Scrimshaws and superior Scrimshaws, there's high level gear, and there are experience rewards. There are also a few other miscellaneous rewards. This is all a lot to go over, so I'm going to save it for the end and tell you how to start building up your port first. Okay, to get started with your player-owned port, you must have at least level 90 in one of the 12 port skills. These are agility, construction, cooking, divination, dungeoneering, fishing, herblore, hunter, prayer, rune crafting, slayer, and thieving. This is because there is one port's adventurer associated with each of these skills, and to start off your port, you must partner up with at least one adventurer to start Voyages. If your account's already aged, there won't really be a problem getting level 90 in at least one of these. But for new accounts, I suggest absolutely power leveling divination or thieving, as they're the fastest to level up with a new account that you can't do too much with yet. Thieving is definitely the fastest, easiest, and most AFK to level overall, especially once you get into safe cracking, but on this iron account, I powered divination to 90 first as soon as I could. It's not as low intensity and AFK as thieving to train, but I suggest it for new accounts because you will need 80 divination anyways to unlock invention later. Actually, really quick, there is one thing in your port you can do weekly for immediate rewards that doesn't require level 90 anything, and that is helping Meg. Every weekly reset, Meg will appear in your port, and you can help her with 3 random adventuring questions from a set of questions she might ask. There are varying answers, and some are very much better, while others are worse. You can reference Meg's wiki page for the full list of questions and answers to see the best options. Once you help with the questions, Meg will leave and come back at the next weekly reset. Depending on how well you answered her questions, and thusly how well her adventure went, she'll give you a reward casket with a varying size experience lamp. If you have the correct path unlocked in May's quest caravan using quest points, you'll also get a little bonus rewards too. The reward lamp you get is always for one of the port skills. So this is just an easy way to get a weekly experience lamp for one of those 12 skills. There is one external thing you can have that greatly speeds up your progress in your port, especially when you get access to farther regions and voyages that take many hours to complete. This thing is the complete Totem of Navigation, the Totem of Navigation from Anachronia. It is actually one of the easiest totems to put together on Anachronia, requiring only searching a spot of rubble for the top, finding 40 Zygomites on Anachronia for the middle, which I have a guide for, a video guide if you need help with that, by the way. And then chopping the scent to the center of one of the overgrown idols on Anachronia for the bottom. The bottom part there does require 81 woodcutting, which can be boosted, and for a fresh account that will take the longest to get, but it's okay because as I mentioned, this totem is only useful once you're a bit farther into your port's progress anyways. So after you have at least one of those level 90 port skills, when you first enter the player port portal, towards the north end of Port Sarim, you will be greeted with a short tutorial, which I highly suggest you play through if you haven't done ports before. It'll walk you through the basics of hiring a crew and sending out voyages and just sending voyages with port's adventurers. After this, you'll get your captain's log, a book that keeps track of your port's progress and even allows you to send voyages when you're not in your port. It also allows you to teleport to your port, which is really handy as a Port Sarim teleport as well, since you can just exit the portal and you'll be right there. For starters, you have access to one ship, and can shop for low-level crew members, which are free to hire, and some captains. The region you can send ships to is called the Ark, for starters, which is the very same Ark you can travel to yourself for various high-level activities. Standard voyages in the Ark will reward you with chimes in bamboo, and it's worth mentioning that these are not the same chimes in bamboo you get from exploring the Ark yourself. These ones are only usable to make purchases in your port. This drop-down interface shows you on the left side how many resources you have from port's voyages. The right side shows the trade goods you've acquired, and these are what you will actually use to craft usable scrimshaws and gear. The main goal as you grow your port is to send out as many voyages as possible per day, up to a maximum of 15 available standard voyages, plus adventurer voyages. Doing these standard voyages will add to your total distance traveled, which you can always check in your captain's log. Whenever your distance traveled hits certain points, the next region you can sail to is unlocked, and you will want to focus your voyages on that until you unlock the next one, and so on. Inside your port, you can click this map icon and scroll over to see your progress to the next region. By the way, I should mention that I have maxed out my port's distance on both my main and iron at this point, so I will show you as best I can how to run your port when you're just getting started, but it'll look different than yours. Okay, so how do you actually play ports? The best way to progress is essentially the same from region to region. I'll cover what you should focus on in each region in a little bit, but the basic strategy is the same. The first step is filling out your crew and captains with the best available. Every day you can go to this menu here and see what crew are available for hire. When you're starting in the Ark, you'll have access to free low-level crew members, as well as some crew members with better stats that cost chimes and bamboo to hire. Every day there will also be one new captain available for hire. Standard crew members have a specialization in one of the three port's ship stats: morale, combat, or seafaring. They specialize in one of those stats and have 0 or close to 0 in the other ones. Captains specialize in one stat as well, but still have some value in the other two. There is also a speed stat, which plays a role, but it's not actually required for successfully completing missions. Generally speaking, to have successful voyages in each region at a minimum, you should aim to eventually hire 5 morale, 5 combat, and 5 seafaring crew, and at least one captain specialized in each of those stats as well. As you progress, you'll see other types of captains and crew as well, but I'll cover that when I cover each region. Now let's go over one of the more complicated parts of your player port, which is actually sending out voyages. When you start, you'll have one ship, and eventually you'll be able to purchase more ships, up to a total of 4 as you progress through the regions. The reason you want at least 5 crew members of each stat type is because each voyage has a minimum value for these stats to be, quote, successful. Voyages can require all 3 stat types, or only 2, or just 1. The great thing about crew members, and the reason I suggest spending your resources on hiring them first, is that they level up over time over voyages, up to level 10. and every time they level, their stats grow by 10%. This really adds up and makes the most impact on your ship's stats, more than anything else. Captains also level up, but at a slower rate. Voyages offer varying amounts of rewards, and the more resources you get from a voyage, the higher total stats your ship needs to be successful. Let's talk about adventure voyages quickly, since these are the core of ports, really. Every day, each adventurer you have unlocked by having level 90 in their respective skill has a chance of appearing in this special Voyages tab with 1 to 3 voyages available. Up to 2 adventurers can be in your port at a time, and each day you can pick out one of their voyages to send out. The primary type of voyage adventurers offer are their respective story voyages. Each one has a total of 6 story voyages, and the next one is unlocked as you unlock new regions. These don't yield any rewards until the last one, and they also don't give you distance, but you should do them right away when available. Unless on the same day they're offering a scroll voyage as well, and then in that case definitely take the scroll voyage. It's important to finish as many adventurous story voyages as you can, because once enough are complete, adventurers can start to have joint voyages with each other if certain combinations of adventurers are in your port at the same time, which yield better rewards than usual from their other voyages. Actually, scratch that. They don't have to have their stories complete in order to do those duo voyages, but they do have to have their stories complete in order to go on trio voyages. There are 4 sets of trio voyages, which consists of groups of 3 adventurers each that go on 3 story voyages together. The last 2 or 3 of which yield a ton of trade goods and special items needed to craft melee and magic weapons. Completing all these story voyages as well is required for increasing your port score, which unlocks various awesome titles, and for the Completionist achievements as well. Adventurers can have voyages for standard resources, but for more than the usual amount and with relatively low stat requirements, so they're good voyages to take. Adventurers can also offer voyages for trade goods. These are the items like ancient bones and chi that you need to actually make usable rewards from ports, and adventure voyages will be your most consistent way to get these. Each adventurer has one specific type of trade good their voyages will get you. Adventurers can also offer experience voyages, which just return with a chunk of experience that increases by region in the port skill associated with them. This goes up to 35,000 experience in the final region. These are best saved for when you really don't care about anything else that the adventurer is offering, because you have everything else already, or they're not offering a scroll voyage. Some adventurers have clue voyages that are a little different than the rest. The way it works is that when you successfully complete 3 clue voyages for an adventure, you get a special reward, which I'll go over later for each one. The thing is that each time an adventurer goes out, they explore one area out of a total of 4 or so possible areas, and only one of those areas completes the voyage successfully, with the adventurer finding what they were looking for. If the voyage is a success, but the adventurer did not find what they were looking for, the clue voyage status doesn't progress to the next one, and the next time that adventurer gets a clue voyage, they will randomly try a different area until they get the right one. You can build a map table eventually in your port to point adventurers in the right direction on some days, but more on that later. Standard voyages will mostly be for resources used to upgrade your port, and more rarely for trade goods used to craft real items. You'll also see as you progress missions to give your captains a certain trait. This is not that important, honestly, until the last regions, so I'll cover that when we get there. Lastly, and most importantly for moneymakers and completionists, adventurers are the only source of scroll voyages. A very important tip here, you should go into the settings tab here and go to the scrolls page and select which scrimshaw or piece of gear you want scrolls for. This way, scroll voyages will return with a piece for that scroll specifically. If you don't specify anything, scroll voyages will just return with a scroll piece to a random thing here, which is absolutely horrible since they are pretty rare and it takes long as it is to complete 4 scrolls for an item. Moving on to your ships. Each ship can have 1 captain and 5 crew members for a voyage, and the basic idea is that you need to assign these crew and captain to a ship to suit the stats required for that voyage. For example, if you want to go on a voyage that requires morale and seafaring, then you can use something like 3 morale crew members, 2 seafaring crew, and a captain specialized in seafaring to even it out. You'll see that the overall success of your voyage is actually dependent on the required stat your ship is weakest in. So if you have this voyage that requires morale and seafaring, if you just use 5 seafaring crew, your morale will be super low, and your success chance for the entire voyage will be based on that. It gets more complicated later, but the most important thing here is to try to have the voyage stat requirements as evenly distributed as possible on your ship to ensure the best success rate. Now, after you've got your crew hired and are starting to gather more resources, you can focus on one of two things. First, if the office in your port has an upgrade available, save up for it and get that as soon as you can. This will add an additional ship to your port and is the best possible upgrade you can make in all of ports when available. The Ark has an office upgrade available, by the way, and you can afford the bamboo for it after only a handful of voyages. Second, you can make upgrades to parts of your ships, and I have some tips on this. First, better and better ship upgrades become available as you progress through regions. Second, if you have multiple ships, you only need to purchase an upgrade one time for it to be available for all ships. By the way, it's very helpful as you purchase upgrades to tick this box here that will only show you the best possible upgrades that you have. You can upgrade the ram/figurehead, the hull, the 2 deck slots, and the rudder. Usually the hull upgrades are the most expensive, followed by the deck, but purchasing a deck upgrade makes it available for both slots there. The best upgrade progression in all regions generally is to start with the rudder, because this increases the ship's speed stat greatly and will allow you to complete more voyages per day. This becomes most important when you get to regions where voyages take so long that you can't finish all 15 available in one day. Next, upgrade the deck, because although it's expensive, whenever you upgrade it, you actually get 2 slots worth of upgrades. Then upgrade the hull, and finally the ram/figurehead, because although it's the cheapest, it's also the most insignificant compared to the other upgrades. Lastly, regarding upgrades, after you have all the best crew hired and all the best ship upgrades for your region, you can upgrade buildings in your port. The only exception in which you should make upgrading buildings in the port a first priority is when you reach a region that allows you to upgrade the office to get another ship slot, as I mentioned earlier. In the early regions, it's typically best to upgrade the warehouse first out of all the buildings, because this will permanently boost the amount of resources you gain from voyages from the current and past regions. Warehouse upgrades are expensive, but in the long run, they will save you a ton of time, so trust me, they're worth it. Next is the shipwright, because this actually boosts your ship's stats by a small amount. Once you've sent your boat out on the voyage, you wait for it to return and claim your rewards if the voyage was successful. A very important thing to mention here is that there are various consequences if your voyage was not successful. Generally speaking, if your chance of success is high, like in the 80%, most of the time nothing bad will happen when a voyage is failed. Sometimes your voyages will even come back with partial rewards. If your success chance is much lower though, there can be pretty disastrous consequences that will set you back. I don't have exact numbers on it, but if your success rate is in the 70% or lower, your ship may be damaged upon returning to your port. In this case, either a large chunk of a random port's resource will be taken to repair it, which really bites, or your ship will be docked for an hour or two and you can pay with actual GP to fix it immediately. But the worst thing that can happen with low success rates is losing a crew member, or even a captain. This really sucks once you start hiring more expensive crew and leveling them up, and especially if a good captain falls overboard, they're really hard to replace. You can avoid losing crew members by acquiring a lifeboat permanently for each of your ships. This touches on the last thing I want to get into before I take you through progress region by region, and that is the little minigames that you can play in the port for some bonus rewards. Sometimes when you collect rewards from a returned voyage, you'll get a pop-up message that someone in the port could use your help. One of 3 minigames then takes place. They take a few minutes to complete and give you rewards that boost stats on your ship for a voyage, boost crew experience, boost speed, things like that. The most important and more rare reward from these activities is the lifeboat. Once you use this on a boat, on your ship, it's there permanently, and it permanently prevents crew and captains from dying on failed voyages. You should definitely do these activities at least until you have 4 lifeboats to equip all your ships, and then decide if you want to keep doing them for those little boost rewards. You can tell which person is looking for you of these 3 minigame people by the gold quest icon above them and on the minimap. The first minigame I'll go over is called A Simple Favor, where you take control of Felix, the Black Marketeer, briefly. Your job is to run around the port and look for barrels that have Death Lotus assassins hiding in them and talk to them. They will describe the target they're after, which will be one of the people walking around the central area of the port. Click on those people, whichever you think is the right one, and if you're correct, the assassin will kill them. You need to do this 3 times for different assassins to complete the minigame. There are no consequences for choosing the wrong person. The assassin will just give you another hint. So sometimes it can actually just be easiest to start clicking on all the people in the middle until you get the right one. The second minigame is called Last Orders, where you control Cerula at the bar, and your job is to give beers to 20 people in the bar and outside. Thing is, she can only carry 2 beers at a time, and you have to go click the bar to restock every 2 beer deliveries. There are people upstairs in the bar as well as outside. This one can be pretty annoying because sometimes it's easy to miss like the last 1 or 2 people, and you can spend a lot of time bumbling around for them, but you should be able to complete this in a few minutes. The last event is called Helping Hand, where you play as Sea Singer Umi and try to help this seemingly inept guy in the warehouse find 3 items that are asked for. He will give you a description of each item in question one by one, and all possible items are hidden randomly in the crates across the room. You need to search each crate, and if it's got the item you're looking for, choose to grab it and speak with the guy to get the description of the next item. It's basically a memory game, since as you're going through items and crates, it'll help you finish faster if you can remember more or less which items are in which crate. We've covered a lot so far, and we still have much more, but let's get on to the region by region progression. Whenever you reach a new region, you should make sure to stick to voyages in that region, because if you travel to older regions, you'll only get half distance from your voyages. This is bad, since it takes months as it is to reach the max distance of 6 million. By default, when you unlock a new region, it will be set to that region for your new voyages. You can go into the options menu here and change that, and the only time you'd want to do this is if you still want to buy some upgrades or hire a crew from a previous region, but this should be rare, and it's usually more worthwhile to just plow through to the next region anyways. So you start in the Ark, and the progression here is simple. First, hire as many free crew members as you can. Second, upgrade the office to get a second ship. After that, focus on buying the best crew with bamboo, and then following the recommended upgrade order of ship parts, then port buildings until you reach the next region. Voyages here take about 20 minutes, so you'll easily be able to finish all of them at your leisure between each daily reset. One thing you'll see as you progress here is different types of crew members. Generally, crew that focus on speed are not worth buying. Golems are tempting, but overall they're not much better than having crew dedicated to one of those 3 ship stats. And also, if a voyage fails, the golems automatically die, so they're just not worth it. Cyclops, on the other hand, are quite good and require a specific standard voyage to unlock so that they can appear in the daily crew roster. As you progress through regions, you'll see a few units that require unlocking like this, and their voyages are more difficult and they are a bit more expensive. But Cyclopses are one of the special units with this ability Rallying Cry, which speeds up the leveling of your crew as a nice bonus. The Ardaugni, I hate the pronunciation of that city, Ardaugni shopkeeper is available in the Ark. And Ardugni? Anyways, he's of the merchant type. Merchant type units boost the number of rewards you get from any resource or trade good voyage, so you should hire them as soon as you can. Their downside is that the only stat bonus they offer is a very low morale boost. So for more difficult journeys, they're not worth it until they level up more. Lastly, you'll see a first mate appear in the roster randomly. This type of unit is critical as it has the Solidarity ability, which buffs all ship stats by a certain amount, multiplied by the number of unique crew you have assigned to a ship. So for any voyage that requires more than 1 stat, which is most voyages, these units give a big boost and are important to hire as soon as you can. The last thing to mention before we cover the next region is 2 merchants and a Cerula in the port that you might find useful. Actually, probably just 1 merchant you'll find useful, because the other one is the trader who sells trade goods, which you need to craft real life rewards again. But he sells them at a cost of an absolutely ridiculous amount of port's resources. There is no way as you're progressing through the regions you'll be able to afford anything from this guy, and by the time you have resources to spare, you'll be swimming in trade goods already, so I completely ignore him. The other merchant is Felix, the Black Marketeer, that sells a number of random resource each day. These are much more useful and attainable because you just trade actual GP for them. The prices are steep, relatively, but for most players, it's not a crippling daily investment of a few hundred K for a good boost in progress in your port. Cerula is the bartender of the port. Once a week on Thursday's daily reset, she will have a gossip or a special voyage for you. It's actually a standard voyage, but if you choose to take it, it replaces the third voyage in your current standard voyages list with one for resources from a random unlocked region. But for a ton of resource as a reward and for little stat requirements. It's a good, easy thing to take advantage of every Thursday reset. Just make sure that the voyage in your third slot isn't one that you really wanted. Shortly in the arc, after about 20 standard voyages, you'll find yourself in the Skull region, where you start gathering gunpowder as the primary resource. At this point, you should try to have the 5 morale, combat, and seafaring units that you hire with bamboo, alongside 2 merchants, 2 first mates, and some cyclopses. You likely won't have all of these, in which case don't worry about it, just press on to the Skull Voyages as you'll still progress quickly through regions here, and these units will become obsolete very soon. Remember to also keep an eye out for new captains whenever you enter a region, as a new tier of captain will occasionally appear in the crew roster just like the crew. You only get 1 new captain available per day though, barring rerolls, so pay attention to those and try to get the 5 of the best captains possible for the region. 2 of each, specialized in 2 of the ship stats and 1 in the third. So what I actually mean is, for example, try to have like a 2 morale, 2 combat, and 1 seafaring captains. There are speed-focused captains available, which are not preferred to actual skill-focused captains, but if they're available and they're better than any of your old captains, they're pretty inexpensive to get as they only cost chines, which you will have too many of very, very soon. Also, a note about hiring crew moving forward, you get up to 15 options for crew members each day and 1 captain. The crew and captains available are only ones from your current region or prior ones. And it doesn't seem like being focused on a region makes crew from the current region more likely to appear in a roster. This means that as you progress through regions, chances are fewer and fewer that you will see the crew members you want in the roster, because crew from every other region will be appearing as well, and it'll just take time for all the crew you need to appear. One thing I've done when I come across the type of crew member I need is just keep them in that slot and don't refresh them. Even after daily reset, the list of 3 crew members here doesn't go away actually, only the captain changes out. So keep the crew members you need here until you can afford them, and then keep refreshing that slot in the crew list to find the next one. The big news here in the Skull region is that the scroll voyages are now doable. As I mentioned earlier, please go into the scrolls page of the settings tab and select the item you want scrolls for, otherwise you'll get random scroll parts. In the Skull, whenever you see scroll voyages available from adventurers, take them over absolutely anything else. At any point, actually, in any region, until you've been doing ports for roughly 15 years in real life and have all the scrolls, prefer scroll voyages over anything else because they are very rare and you will need to start collecting these as early as you can to craft items and get completionist achievements. Otherwise, progression in the Skull is a rinse and repeat of the arc. Save up for the best crew, then the best ship upgrades, then port upgrades. I recall being able to complete most voyages with pretty good success rates here, and these voyages will take about 40 minutes, so you should still be able to finish all 15 daily voyages between your 2 ships. You'll notice that here and moving forward to other regions that some building upgrades require resources from previous regions. This is one of the only acceptable times that you should go to settings and switch back to a region, an older region, to save up for something like a new ship slot. Also, it's worth noting that even when you have a certain region selected for voyages, it's possible to receive voyages from other regions. It's just more rare. So if you're in the Skull and you need to save up for the new ship slot and see a bamboo voyage come your way every now and then, just take it. You'll see some new crew options here and be able to update your core crew of morale, combat, and seafarers. You'll also see a new speed-focused crew member and a new golem, which you can continue ignoring. There's also a new type of unit available here of the Good Fortune ability type. These are weak, and Good Fortune is not worth worrying about, so ignore them too. There is also the next Solidarity unit available called the Eastern Overseer, and the next step up from Cyclops and Rallying Cry unit called the Siren Whale Rider, which requires a special voyage as well to unlock. You should get both of these units as often as possible too, and they will serve you for quite a while in next regions. The next region is called the Hook. It takes about 60 standard voyages in the Skull to get here. Its resource is called Slate, and it follows much the same pattern as the other regions. At this point, if you don't already, you should start working towards the Totem of Navigation to cut down on travel times of your voyages, as voyages will start taking long enough that you might not be able to finish all 15 in a day. And it's important that you do to get the maximum distance possible. You get one more office slot here, too, that you should get as soon as possible, giving you one more ship. You now then can hire a total of 3 Solidarity units and 3 merchants, with a new merchant available called the Trader. There's also Feral Chimera available after a special voyage unlock, and this is the next Rallying Cry unit progression from Siren Whale Riders. After about 85 standard voyages in the Hook, you'll reach the next region, called the Scythe. The resource here is red cherrywood, and here some things start to get more complicated. Here you'll start seeing increased difficulty in voyages, and will actually have to be careful about not taking on voyages that are too difficult. You'll need to hire new crew members and level them up a bit before taking on the more rewarding voyages, so a good strategy here is to keep one of your ships as a leveling ship of sorts, and focus on putting new crew there, and just send it out on easy missions to level them up. Another thing that becomes more difficult in the Scythe is saving up for the warehouse upgrade as early as possible. From this point forward, actually, in all regions upcoming, warehouse upgrades start to get more and more difficult to attain before spending resources on better crew and ship upgrades, because voyages become increasingly difficult. At this point, it's up to your discretion if you want to prioritize saving for the warehouses, but it's okay if you dump that until later to focus on building up your ship stats. You'll need lots of cherry wood for future upgrades once more regions are unlocked, so as soon as you've spent enough of it on stat upgrades, definitely upgrade the warehouse before anything else that requires cherry wood, if possible. In addition to core crew updates that you get here, you'll see the new Merchant and Solidarity units called the Merchant and Bureaucrat, which you should get to replace your other 3 of each as soon as possible. There's also a new Voyage unlockable Sea Witch unit, which I have mixed feelings on. Their stats are better than the core units in this region in total, but they are expensive, and they have this resurrect ability that's pretty useless. I've also read that it's bugged, and I've never made use of it, so I'm not going to go into that. My opinion is skip the Sea Witches and save the cherry wood for the warehouse and future upgrades. After roughly 130 standard voyages here, you progress to the Bowl region, where the new resource is Jade. And you'll see a big step up in difficulty, as everything just costs a lot more than it did before proportionally. But there are many new substantial upgrades you can get in this region. Firstly, as you buy a new crew and replace your old members, you'll see that new crew are weaker than the ones you currently have. It'll take about 3 level ups for new crew members to catch up to your old ones, and then they will quickly surpass them. So you might need more than 1 learner boat for easy voyages at first. You get a new office upgrade available here too, the last one, which requires an absolute chunk of cherry wood and jade. This is the only office upgrade I would recommend waiting on until you have a decently leveled crew available and a few ship upgrades caught up. It may be tempting to focus on the warehouse upgrade for a little jade boost, as it only costs 4,000 jade instead of 10,000 of the office slot, but I recommend getting the office upgrade first. You can upgrade your Merchant and Solidarity units here to Jade Merchants and Judge of Dice, both of which will carry you for a long time. Once you get the 4th ship slot, you can optionally expand to hire a total of 4 Merchants and 4 Judge of Dice as available. A new set of port upgrades becomes available as well when you unlock the Bowl, Totem hotspots. There are a total of 4, and you can build a variety of totems that all each require 3,000 jade and 2,000 cherry wood, and grant different effects. My strongest suggestion is to build 3 telescopes as soon as possible to increase the chances of receiving scroll voyages by 9% once you have all 3. Again, unlocking all scroll items is the thing in ports that takes by far the longest, so any boost you can get to chances of getting scroll voyages should be taken. Now, I recommend only 3 instead of 4 telescopes because you can see that with 4 telescopes, the chances of scroll voyages only increases by 1 more percent to 10%. Instead, I find it better to have a map table. This is what I mentioned earlier that can help you get adventurers' clue voyages solved faster. It's a little confusing, but the way that map tables works is that for each map table you have, you can check it every 4 days to see if it's pointing to a specific area. The next time your adventurer with a clue voyage comes to the port, you can talk to the adventurer in the bar and tell them to search the region that the map table showed you for a guaranteed success. After you bear through the bowl for roughly 160 voyages, you'll unlock the Pincers region. The resource here is stainless steel, and this region overall is more boring than the others. Aside from upgrades to your core crew, there is one more worthwhile unlockable unit called Oxhead and Horseface, awesome name, which is half decent. I would recommend getting only one though, as overall its stats are only better than standard units on voyages that require all 3 stats. If you still don't have 3 telescopes and 1 map table totem built yet, now is a good time to go back to the previous regions briefly to get the cherry wood and jade for them, as they'll serve you really well in the long run. It takes about 185 voyages in the Pincers to unlock the second to last region, the Loop. While the Pincers was probably the most boring region, the Loop is the most sucky by far. Resource voyages for terracotta clay here reward much less than past regions for some reason, and success rates are very low starting out. The best you can do is upgrade your core crew and ship. You unlock the Wisp unit through a unique voyage here, which is strong, but I only recommend getting 1 for voyages that require all 3 stats. The end goal of your crew setup here should be 6 morale, 6 combat, 5 seafaring, 4 judge of dice, 3 terracotta merchants, and 1 wisp. This is the end setup suggested by the wiki, which I agree with. The new merchants can be saved for last here, the terracotta merchants, as the improvement they give over the jade merchants is small, and it's more important to build up your core crew first. Only 5 seafaring units are suggested because your ship upgrades at this point will give better bonuses to seafaring than other stats. It takes about 265 voyages to unlock the shield region from here, the last one, so substantially more than the previous region. It's also not a bad time here then, once you've upgraded your crew, to go back to prior regions and get resources for totems and warehouses. I actually remember on this account unlocking the shield region before I fully upgraded even my ship with terracotta, and I didn't really care, as it was just better to go through the shield missions and get new crew and the better ship updates there. Once you hit the shield, you've got all regions unlocked. I remember on this account as well that it took me probably a month to get to this point. You're still not done though, as far as voyage distance is concerned. In order to start getting Tetsu Tsubas and Gemstone Kaseki and a few other unique voyages, the Tsuba and Kaseki of which are required for making Tetsu Katanas and Sea Singer weapons, you need a total distance traveled of 6 million to unlock everything. When you first unlock the shield, your total distance will be 4.1 million, which means you have 1.9 million to go and about 240 standard shield voyages. You need, for example, 6 million distance to unlock the final trio voyage of Guardians of the World with the Memory, Tengu, and Exile adventurers. Your end goal here should be to stick to the shield to power through until you get 6 million distance, unless you're in no particular rush for the trade goods and weapon components and whatnot. In which case, you can just go back to other regions if it helps you build upgrades that help your scroll hunting or resource collection. Just remember that voyages in all regions besides the shield at this point will yield half distance traveled towards your total. A good endgame crew setup here is what I now have. 4 Corradian Exiles, which require a unique voyage to unlock and are the best Solidarity unit. 4 Terracotta Merchants, 5 Combat, 6 Morale, and 6 Seafaring units. You can change up which one of the core units you have 5 or 6 of, it doesn't matter much at this point. You should also aim at this point for each of your captains to have the traits Leader, Tactician, Sea Friend, and Lookout, ideally, as these give a 1% boost to the ship's total morale, combat, seafaring, and speed, respectively. By the end game, this makes a big difference. Captains will already have some traits when you hire them, and each captain can only have 4 traits, but over time, you can remove inferior traits with the Clue Voyage rewards from the Memory Adventurer. I'll go over that later. So that covers the whole region progression. If you've made it this far or got the 6 million distance, congrats! But your port's journey is far from over, and it's never really over at all. But now you can focus on trade goods, clue, and scroll voyages as you gradually send out ships on resource missions to finish the remaining upgrades for your port. And now we can talk about the rewards. Scrimshaws become fairly easy to make, as you'll accumulate a good amount of ancient bones over time, and Scrimshaws require either 2 or 10 bones to make, and 90 or 92 fletching, depending on the one. There may be some that require only 85 fletching, but they're not that worth mentioning, so anyways. The armor and weapons, though, require much more. 100 trade goods for main hand weapons, 50 for the offhand, for example, along with secondary trade goods. To speed along the gathering for this gear, it's important to complete all adventure and story missions, especially the trio missions, as soon as you can. The trio mission finales in particular will reward you with like 50 of various trade goods, which is a huge chunk. Also, the Guardians of the World story missions each reward you with a gemstone kaseki, tetsu suba, and finally 50 plate and sheet to help you craft them. After you get your 1 gemstone kaseki and 1 tetsu tsuba from that story mission, or not necessarily after, but aside from that, the only way to get these items to craft the other Sea Singer or Tetsu weapon is by a very rare voyage from the shield region. So if you're going for those weapons, keep your voyages in the shield region and just keep refreshing and going through standard voyages every day, because it is pretty rare. Sometimes you'll get lucky and get, you know, Tsuba or Kaseki voyages back to back, but sometimes it can take like weeks, so be patient, they'll show up. In order to craft any of the Scrimshaws gear or the 2 types of high level soup, you'll need to acquire 4 parts of its respective scroll and then have the required levels in the corresponding artisan skills to make them. You'll then be able to craft tradable versions of these things to sell for money, or superior versions that have better effects or stats to use for yourself. Starting with Scrimshaws, the hands down most worthwhile for any player to unlock first is the Scrimshaw of Vampirism. In fact, this is the scroll voyage item that I recommend all players unlock first, just hands down. It is by far the most useful Scrimshaw that makes many bosses and slayer tasks not only easier, but even possible for mid to high level players. There are a variety of skilling and other combat Scrimshaws that I won't get into here because that could be a whole video on its own, but all regular Scrimshaws last for 3 hours, the sellable ones, whereas the untradable superior versions last for 4 hours. The superior versions also have a stronger effect. For example, the regular Scrimshaw Vampirism heals you for 5% of your melee damage that you deal, whereas the superior version heals you for 6.6% of all melee damage you deal. Both versions cost the same number of bones to make, so if you plan on using any Scrimshaws yourself, it's to your benefit to make the superior ones. If you want to sell, of course, make the tradable regular ones. Scrimshaws require those ancient bones to make, and you start acquiring these regularly once your port is halfway decent. As of the making of this video, selling any Scrimshaws will get you a profit of just under 200k per ancient bone. These prices change as things in the rest of RuneScape change, but you can check the Scrimshaw wiki page for the latest prices if you want to see which ones sell for the best price. The high level combat gear is crafted from different trade goods as well, and also comes in tradable regular versions or superior untradable versions. All the armors are tank armors, and the regular versions have tier 85 stats, while the superior versions have tier 88 stats. The same goes for weapons, although upgrading the weapons to elite tier 88 versions requires some rare drops from Elite Dungeons 1, the Temple of Aminishi. Each armor set for range, mage, and melee requires 4 scrolls to unlock per piece, just like Scrimshaws, and has a helmet, body, and legs available for unlocking. There are also tier 88 gloves and boots for each set, but those are actually unlocked via the Arc, purchasable with chimes and taijutsu, and then you still have to craft them. In order to craft melee Tetsu armor, you'll need 90 smithing, non-boostable, unfortunately, I tried. To craft the swords, you need 92 smithing. Similarly, you need 90 and 92 rune crafting, respectively, to craft the Sea Singer armor and weapons, and the same levels in crafting for Death Lotus gear. Of most interest to players here is the magic armor and weapons. This is because magic tank armor is far more useful than other combat styles tank armors due to animate dead. Also, most players prefer power armor for melee and range, and at this point it's relatively inexpensive to just buy tier 90 power armor for those styles. Making the tier jump from the 80s to 90s for magic though, especially for tank armor, is a different story. While the tier 85 Sewer Wand, Ninja Turtle. Anyways, the wand and orb are pretty cheap by high level standards. The jump to tier 90 dual wielded magic seismics will run you over 1 billion though at this time. Some players might find this to be quite a gap, especially when you can get a pair of kick-ass tier 85 Sea Singer dual wields and upgrade them easily to tier 88 Sea Singer weapon dual wields with the Sea Singer weapon upgrade kits, which right now cost only 11 million. Sea Singer armor is also the only tank magic armor in the tier 80s right now, period. Aside from that, your only upgrade in tank armor from Ganodermic is Crypt Bloom, which in full will run you 1.7 billion right now. So, although it takes forever to get the resources for the full Sea Singer set, it is totally worth it. The only other alternative for high-level magic tank armor is a lot of Mazcat braids grinding for Primeval gear, which is tier 90 but untradeable. Regarding ranged armor, I personally use the superior Death Lotus armor for a while, and like it. Most players hate it because it's not power armor, and will prefer tier 80 or even tier 70 power armor to tier 88 tank armor. If you care about that, there are affordable lower level range power armors out there. I have found that if you're not at crazy high tiers of range DPS yet, the defensive boost helps a lot at many bosses, much more than the power boost of weaker armors, especially at a boss like Carapac, who actually will splash on you pretty often if you're wearing superior Death Lotus. The ranged weapons available from ports are different than the other two styles in that they are Death Lotus darts, which are consumable and not augmentable. This makes them a little annoying to maintain, and upgrading them to the tier 88 variant requires Death Lotus Extract from the Elite Dungeons reward shop for 5,000 engineering tokens, or it's a really rare drop with Lucky Charms in the Elite Dungeon. It's a bit annoying. I'd recommend this maybe only for the offhand if you can only afford like one Ascension crossbow or something, until you can afford the proper offhand. Lastly, the melee Tetsu gear is comparable to high-level gear like Masterwork armor and Drygore weapons. Again, most players will prefer Masterwork since it's cheap and tier 90 power instead of tier 88 tank, and that's fine. Drygores are also quite cheap tier 90 dual-wield weapons, leagues cheaper than the tier 90 dual-wielded range or magic weapons, so players will also prefer those over elite Tetsu katanas. I, however, have always used Tetsu katanas because, in my opinion, Drygore weapons are some of the most fugly pieces of equipment ever created. But that's just me. I also rocked Tetsu armor on my main for a while, to be honest, but personally, and for fashionscape reasons, I really just prefer gear that you have to earn, rather than gear that you can just buy for really cheap and use because it's best in whatever that tier slot. Lastly, regarding scroll voyages, there are 3 miscellaneous items you can obtain scrolls for which to craft. The Reefwalker Cape, Leviathan Ring, and Eastern Soups. The Reefwalker Cape and Leviathan Ring are niche, very defensive items that aren't really preferred over other capes or rings, so I won't really discuss them. The Eastern Soups are interesting because unlocking this will allow you to make rocktail and sailfish soups with high-level cooking. These soups heal more than their respective fishes and can heal you past your maximum HP for up to 15% more. So that's nice, but even more interesting is the fact that rocktail and sailfish soups at this moment sell for 15k and 25k each, respectively. So if you're looking to make money off of ports, unlock this as soon as you can. Each soup takes just 1 cooked rocktail or sailfish and 1 port's spice. I think that finally covers all the most important things you need to know about running your own port. I really hope all this helped break it down for those of you that were feeling stuck. I know it's a lot to learn because it's essentially an entire city builder type game within RuneScape. The last thing I want to cover now that I haven't gone into detail about is each port's adventurer and what they're useful for, including any special clue rewards that they have. If you're looking for voyages from a particular adventurer, by the way, there are 3 icon hotspots in your ports building that you can use to build icons to specific to the adventurer to increase the chances of them coming to your port each day. The icons are cheap and easy to swap out often, as they only cost a handful of chimes. I don't know by how much they increase the chance of an adventurer visiting, but I do believe having multiple does help. I'll start with the memory, as it's the first one I unlocked, and she has a very useful clue voyage reward. The memory requires 90 divination to meet, and her trade good is plate, used to craft Tetsu gear. She can have the rare aforementioned clue voyages. Once the 3 voyages are completed successfully, every following clue voyage from the memory will be a special one that removes the weakest trait from the captain that was sent on that voyage. This is very, very helpful for getting rid of bad traits that captains come with to make room for the best endgame traits. The Tengu is another of the Guardians of the World trio, which also has an interesting clue voyage reward recurringly. He requires 90 agility to unlock, and his trade good is chi, used to craft Sea Singer gear. The Tengu's clue voyages are unique in that once the 3 prerequisite searching clue voyages are done, every following voyage of that type will first require a donation of your port's chimes. You need to actually find the Tengu in the bar and choose how many chimes to donate to this voyage. You can donate up to 200,000 chimes, which is the max possible you can have in your port. Then, when the Tengu's voyage returns, you're rewarded the gift of goo, which can include several hard-to-obtain items like superior Scrimshaws, helmets from the port's armor sets, Death Lotus darts, Rocktail soup, and sometimes one piece of the goo outfit. The goo outfit is cosmetic, and as far as I know, not required for any completionist stuff. This special voyage only becomes available if your current region is set to the shield, by the way. The third Guardian of the World member is the Exile, which requires 90 dungeoneering to meet in your port. Her trade good is lacquer, used to craft Death Lotus equipment. Her clue voyage is also one of the most interesting and useful. After the prerequisite 3 clue voyages are completed, just like with the others, and only after you've hit the 6 million distance mark, a voyage called A Place for Everything becomes available, which rewards you with a World Bearer ring. The ring gives you a teleport to the faraway place where things are kept, where you choose to open one of 2 chests for a reward, a dungeoneering chest or a ports chest. The dungeoneering chest can award varying amounts of dungeoneering tokens, dungeoneering experience lamps, a horde stalker ring, or a basic gold accumulator. The ports chest can award a good number of trade goods of varying sizes and experience lamps. There are 3 other adventurers who offer clue voyages, and they have rewards very similar to each other. Essentially, they unlock voyages of these adventurers to get some of the stat boosting items you usually get as a reward from the random event minigames in the port. Completing the clue voyages for these adventurers will also raise the cap of the max amount you can have of that respective boost item from 3 to 10. The chef's clue voyages provide these boosts for ration packs, which boost morale on a voyage. He requires 90 cooking to unlock. The Trapper requires 90 Hunter, and his clue voyages do the equivalent for powder kegs to boost combat. Lastly, the Whaler's equivalent gives Seasinger's Bottled Cries to boost seafaring, and he requires 90 fishing to unlock. The Chef's trade good is spice, used to make the Eastern soups. The Trapper has 2 trade goods he gets per voyage, koi scales and pearls, with more pearls rewarded per trip. Koi scales are used for the Reefwalker cape and as a secondary component to Sea Singer weapons. The pearls are used for the Leviathan ring and as a secondary component to Tetsu weapons. And the Whaler's trade good is plate. The other adventurers come only with the other voyage types for region resources, trade goods, scrolls, experience, and story. The Architect requires 90 construction to meet, and similarly to the Trapper has voyages for both koi scales and pearls, but with more koi scales until the shield region where the amount evens out. The Assassin requires 90 Slayer and has spice voyages. The Biologist requires 90 Herblore and has ancient bone voyages. The Missionary requires 90 Prayer and has ancient bone voyages. The Convict requires 90 Thieving and awards lacquer. And the Occultist requires 90 runecrafting and has chi voyages. Okay, that's all. For real. That's all of ports. Just kidding. There are minor details and things that I haven't covered, but I have gone over everything you need to know really to know about building up your port from scratch and getting all items and achievements you need in the most efficient manner. Please let me know in the comments if this was helpful. Please ask any questions still lingering because the player-owned port is complicated and some things may still be unclear. Thank you so very much for watching. Please do consider liking this video and subscribing for more content like this, and I'll catch you in the next one.